Hello, thank you for coming to Skeptrack. We have a wonderful panel ahead. I just want to remind folks, please, if you're interested in the parade, Margaret will be in the back eventually. She's downstairs right now, but she'll be right back up. If you're interested in participating, also DragonCon is donating to the American Heart Association. If you'll please give us your donations, thank you very much. And this is live feed on video.skeptrack.org. So this is Roxanne Henkle. She is a podcaster for needcoffee.com, which will be very popular with the DragonCon crowd, and with Spaz House Institute Research. Thank you very much. I will turn the panel over to you.
Hi, and do we have... Boo. There we go. Is it one of those you have to get really close? I guess. All right. This is sort of a continuation of last year's panel discussion on the apocalypse and prepping. And I'm going to let everybody on the panel from my left, your right, introduce themselves.
Hey, my name's Charlie Kaufman. I've got a background in environmental and marine biology research. I currently work in the emergency management field. My DragonCon experience right now may be cut short due to an actual emergency management Hurricane Dorian going on, but I'm happy to be here for the moment.
All right. My name is Mika McKinna. I'm a geophysicist and disaster researcher. My current research is looking at landslides on asteroids, but previously I was a FEMA consultant looking at really, really big catastrophic disasters. I also work in fiction, so I get to look at all the ways we can have doom and death and destruction in movies and TV shows, and hopefully then not in real life.
Hi, I'm Steve Novella. I'm a neuroscientist and a physician, and also host of a skeptical podcast.
Richard Saunders. I come from the end of the world, Australia. I'm a podcaster, a long-time member of the Australian Skeptics, and part-time actor and science educator.
I'm Matt Dillahunty. I host the Atheist Experience TV show and do debates, and I have no expertise in the apocalypse other than all the people who call me telling me how eager they are for it to happen.
Well, due to Hurricane Dorian, I've already evacuated, so I've already prepped by being here. So let's open it up a little bit of... One thing we didn't talk about was sort of the scams that people do fall for when they think that what they're doing as a prepper is correct. Does anyone want to handle that wide open one? It's really quick.
I mean, you can go anywhere with that. So people get scared, and when you're scared, it's a lot easier to get talked into things. And this can take all sorts of forms, from relatively harmless, like prefab disaster kits that are almost always kind of useless, because ideally you want a disaster kit that fits you and your needs and your lifestyle, and you're not going to find that off the shelf, up through more sinister things like, hey, this comet is going to come and kill us all, let's drink the Kool-Aid and die together first. So there's this huge range of things where people are susceptible to being talked into things. And I guess the easiest piece of advice on that is don't make decisions when scared. Like, take that moment back, step back, and not make the emotional decision.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a couple that I see on a regular basis. One is the whole idea that you should buy silver. Anybody hear about this one? So yeah, stock up on actual physical silver, because you're going to be bartering that in the apocalypse, which is nonsense. No one's going to be giving you food for your silver in any kind of hypothetical situation, but somehow that's going to be the currency that survives the economic collapse, which, if you recall from last year, that's the most common scenario that people worry about. You say, how's the civilization going to collapse? I think it's going to be economic collapse. And then related to that is all the prepper food. So there are companies that will sell you food that you could, like freeze dried or dehydrated food that's made to last for years. And there's like Patriot food, like that really, they know who they're marketing to, right? And I've actually sampled some of this. It's terrible. And invariably, you are just feeding the rats in your basement, right? Because, I mean, come on, people, unless you have a steel something to put them in, like you have to have a place to put them. I guess if you were stocking a bunker, that would be the kind of thing. But like they're just trying to get people to buy this food and put it in their basement. You're just feeding the rats at that point. You're never going to actually like break that shit open and eat it. You know what I mean? Just as a meal. You're better off just figuring out a way of buying regular food, dried goods or whatever that you're going to actually use and be in the rotation if you want to prolong your food supply. But that stuff is like you're going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on food that you're never going to eat. It's a total scam in my opinion.
Maybe you can eat the rats.
I mean, not only are you never going to eat it, but it's also going to be disgusting if you do.
Yeah,
so this is, if you're already having the worst day of your entire life, wouldn't you want like some chocolate? Or like, I'm serious. In my go bag, I have chocolate and scotch because if I'm already having a really bad day, I need something to cheer me up. I mean, I've got normal food in there too, but you want to have, if you do it as your emergency stash is actually an extended pantry, it's where you have your extra food, then you're guaranteed that it's fresh. You're guaranteed that it's like fresh, not like wilty lettuce fresh, but fresh as in not 17-year-old dehydrated ramen. Like it's not expired. There we go. And it's something you actually eat. And as your tastes change or your dietary needs change or anything like that, if you're using as your extended inventory, extended pantry, you're already rotating through and you're already keeping it up to date with what you actually like, enjoy, and make.
And I'll split the difference with that. There's some, being in an emergency management world and having storms come up, there's some things there that you'll have, like, and I don't want to name out the brand names, but there's some that are very good in an emergency if you're going to be eating it like during the 3 days you're waiting for help to arrive. They're really good, they're self-heating, they survive, and the recipes have gotten better. The ones that he's mentioning where they actually will sell you like a year's worth of food that come in a giant drywall bucket that you add water and heat
That's
up
what I'm
yourself.
talking to,
yeah. That's the stuff that, and I've been to conferences where like, we'll send you your entire family's year worth of food that comes in this package and you just stick it in a giant Ziploc bag and put it in their basement. And like, no, that's the stuff you don't need. But the small heater meals that you actually can get and pack that it almost looks like you can go to like a camping store and eat for a disaster, those are actually getting better, and I have lived off of those. So you can use those during a disaster, but you don't need to like storehouse the stuff for years.
Yeah, overall storehousing, not particularly great idea. So that's one of the chunks of how much preparedness do you actually need to do. Like we say everything from 72 hours to 2 weeks to, be prepared for the end of the world and collapse of all civilization. From emergency management perspective, where do you put that balance of risk, money, time, space, actual preparedness?
The rule of thumb we tell people is everybody in your family, up to and including your children and your pets, needs to have enough supplies for 3 days on your own. And the reason that 3 days is a rule of thumb is that because it takes usually 3 days for emergency services to get to you in an area. So, and you probably want to extend that out to, let's say, a 5-day a work week. So if you can survive, and that's, everyone has a gallon of water per person per day, enough food, and again, include your pets and your kids in that. So if you can have that for a week stashed, but don't have it now, like in case something happens. Like, we're pretty good with storms coming in. Jim Cantori will show up on your front doorstep. Everyone will know when it's coming, or have a supply of it. If you can have that ready for you to go, then you'll be okay. So then when emergency services comes in and starts restoring at least some sort of order, then you'll be okay. You don't have to be the doomsday prepper that's got his, basement huddled out, dug out underneath with everything stacked underneath.
I've gone through a number of storms, and it's always the financial aspect, and I'll probably come back to this again several times because it's always the bottom line of your pocketbook. But there'll be a run on grocery stores for water.
Right.
And what happens is, and nobody really knows this, it's like after the storm passes and you have 60 gallons of water, a lot of people try to take that back to the store. Publix will not take that back. That is something that you cannot return. So that's something that is a good rule of thumb, because what do you weigh your waste on? And going back to like the scammer type people, that's really, they do prey upon, the con artists will prey upon, people's fears and stuff. And if we could hear from Richard, because he's got a different take from a global aspect.
Let's look for a little while at the psychology. Why do people think the world's going to end in the first place? What have they been sold? What have they been told? And largely it's due to religious reasons. This is talking from an Australian perspective, but we'll get to preppers soon. Quite frankly, there aren't that many preppers in Australia for whatever reason. Maybe it's so remote nobody thinks anything bad's going to happen there. I don't know. But I've got a few slides to illustrate some points, if we can call those up. Here we go. Australia, the end of the world. Now, Australia and the end of the world, that should be. So for those of you who don't know, there's Australia. It's right up there. And there we are, tucked around the bottom side somewhere in the USA. It's hard to find from Australia, really, but there's Australia in its rightful position. I come from Sydney, which is located there, as you can see. And it's interesting. We have various times in our history where the end of the world was coming. One of the most famous ones to Sydney-siders was the Star Amphitheatre, which was built, reborn in 1924 for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Well, that's the legend anyway. And you see you missed it. Don't worry, it'll happen next year again. If you look at that top photograph there, you can see what we call the Sydney Heads. That's the entry to Sydney Harbour. And the idea was that Jesus Christ would walk through Sydney Harbour, on the water, and speak at this amphitheatre. Now, the bottom X there is the location, and the big circle is the main downtown area. That's where the harbour bridge is and the Opera House and all the touristy bits. But no, Jesus was going to walk on the water happily and give his talks there in Sydney. Why Jesus Christ would choose Sydney, Australia to come and give a talk, I really don't know. But that was the idea. But people believed these things at the time, and you can start to think of the psychology. There will always be people who think the end times are coming. This is just a list of end-of-the-world predictions and prophecies from this century alone. And we've got a few notable ones there. Jim Jones in 1978. We all know about Jonestown, unfortunately. Harold Camping, who we'll get to again in a moment, first was prophesying in 1994. I think that is the second coming of Jesus Christ. We've got Heaven's Gate, sadly, another famous one in 1997. It goes on. This is more up to date. And the big red circle there is Harold Camping again, which we'll discuss in a moment. And the little one on the other side is simply what's happening at the moment. So you can pick any year, and more there will be people saying the end times are coming, and there'll be people ready to believe that. If you remember, in 2011, Harold Camping on his family radio said the end of the world was coming. Judgment Day would be on the 21st of May. That top sign is one I took in Sydney, Australia. They bought billboards all around the world. And it was huge, because some nut in America bought a big billboard. Not only that, the bottom one, Sydney, Australia, not far from where I live. And he sent his people out to all around the world. There he is. Now, this guy was, I think, photographed in Melbourne, but I spoke to a very similar guy in Sydney who assured me the world was coming to an end, and he knew it. Now, this is the sort of person who might also be easily conned into giving away lots of money to a doomsday person to sell food or whatever the case may be. But the end of the world is certainly nothing new. Here's some great examples from Australian history. Here we are. We have the end of the world predicted In the year 1901, it was supposed to end. That was predicted in 1893. We got another one, startling announcement, it certainly was. In 1895, the world was going to come to an end. I like this one here from the 12th of January 1922. Modern prophets, not much warning. So the end of the world's coming. They have admitted to apologize for the lateness of their notice, which I thought was quite funny. And again, even more recently, here's the Canberra Times from 1992. Again, the end of the world is coming. Now, what the last one illustrates, and we might be able to chat about this on the panel, when the end of the world doesn't come, a lot of these people are not disillusioned. Mm-hmm. They will, and we've been discussing this, Steve.
Yeah, they double down.
They'll double down, or they'll come up with reasons as to why the case is the world didn't come to an end. Finally, that's a scary headline. We do have some preppers in Australia, but they're just very infrequent, so they tend to make the newspapers sometimes. It's not an industry back home, like I think it's an industry here. Mm-hmm. And I know of nobody who's a prepper. I know of nobody who has a bomb shelter. I don't know if you can say the same yourself. Maybe it's a fiction that we all believe in Australia, that Americans know people with the preppers. Yeah?
I know a prepper.
You know?
I thought I would never know a prepper, but I have a neighbor that is. Wow. And they just purchased property in Kentucky. And I'm like, and I'm thinking, and we're talking, he's like, yeah, well, it's for my kids, and when they grow older, and I'm like, I thought you were, my brain is like, I thought you were sane, and you bought this land, and it's a bug out, it's just like, it floored me, because he's, we have this perception, and I'll say it, of what is a prepper. And it's usually the other side of the coin. But if you go to the other side, too, it's almost, you make a curve and they're right the same sensibility. And I'm like, because they're very liberal and everything. And it's just like, you have a bug out. Can I come? No, but it was just amazing.
In your experience, are very religious people who might think the world's coming to an end for religious reasons, are they likely to prep, or they don't worry about that?
Well, there's some religions that have it as part of the actual core philosophy. So Mormonism has it as one of the basic faiths, is emergency preparedness, which means it's a fairly standard thing. It used to be all the inner jokes about having canned food in the basements and all of that. Now it's less about stockpiling materials and more about having a reserve of cash for emergencies. So the execution of it has shifted over time. And I've been interviewing people about what do they think the basis of this, why is it incorporated specifically into Mormonism in a way that it isn't an article of faith in other ways. And part of the idea is maybe that's because it was a West Coast, like heading out into a territory with less infrastructure and resources. It's that kind of frontier colonialism viewpoint of needing to be prepared as part of the foundation of the religion. So an interesting one on that. It's not just the religious apocalypses that get me, though. It's the ones that I run into all the time as a disaster scientist is Yellowstone is about to erupt, or an asteroid is going to hit the Earth next week. 2012, and I don't even know what was supposed to happen with that one. I honestly, and I've watched the movies too, and I still don't. The resurfacing of the entire planet I don't know. I don't know. Of these concepts, or taking what has a seed of truth to it. So the big one earthquake. I'm on the West Coast. The big one earthquake, and it's going to come. But yes, that bit is true. But the part about is going to like dump California into the ocean, and I'm going, but that's not how plate tectonics works. Like you can't rip off a chunk of California and dump it in the ocean. Continents float.
Challenge accepted.
You can try really, really hard. You can try, but I mean that's what the Himalayas are. Is an attempt to that's what happens when continents are slamming into each other. It's not one going under the other. It floats. It's why all the oldest rocks in the world are on continents, not ocean floors. If you want to get rid of part of the surface of the Earth, it better be an ocean floor. It's dense, it sinks. Or I'm up in the Pacific Northwest, home of the Cascadia Zone earthquake, that New Yorker article that terrified everybody, and in a lot of ways understated what the disaster is going to be. But even then, it's not that Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver are going to fall into the ocean or are going to be buried under 30 feet of lava or something like that. It can be a nasty earthquake. It can be like 5 minutes of severe shaking. But the land still exists afterwards. Like, there's still earth there. So those ones I find really challenging, because you're going, well, you've got the seed of truth, but the interpretation is confusing me.
That could be stemming a little bit. So, and I've noticed this like in Home Depot and Lowe's, is the amount of publications now gearing towards the prepper mentality. That here now you can find these magazines, how to survive while you're picking up wood for your weekend project. And you can pick, I counted at least 3 of them. That it's, and I think last year, the New Yorker had the article, and this is going into like secularism, that you get more and more rich people buying bug out areas. Because, so Richard, like in this New Yorker article, it was a bunch of Americans buying up property in New Zealand. I mean, have you heard that?
I have, yeah. New Zealand is considered to be one of the most safest places on earth, I think. Stable economy, stable culture, despite
not stable rocks.
Except for Christchurch.
Really not stable rocks.
Yeah. Not exactly. They call it the Shaky Isles.
Yeah,
and there was a very tragic, of course, a terrorist incident there not so long ago. But apart from that, I've been to New Zealand quite a few times. It's not far to go, really, from Australia. It's a wonderful place, and if I had a spare millions, I might be tempted to do the same myself. It's a beautiful country, yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to get at, this idea of where's the safest place on Earth, because the idea that there's anywhere that's safe from disasters, no, it's just disasters you're comfortable with. I mean, New Zealand is a geologically mirrored zone to what we've got up in the Pacific Northwest. It's a subduction zone, one plate going underneath another. So not only do you have the potential for really big Mag 8 and 9 earthquakes, but you also have one plate going under another, which means it's going all melty and making volcanoes. And like, there were active eruptions in Auckland in like World War II. That's not that long ago. And that there's incredibly unstable mountains because it's volcanic rock that's all kind of loosely held together. It's a lot of rain. It had glaciers come through and chop the toes off everything, so all the rocks are unstable, and then you occasionally shake it. So you have a lot of landslides.
I've changed my mind, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, and this is the point, right? Because I'm comfortable with landslides and fires and earthquakes. I grew up on the West Coast. I was in the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake as like one of my earliest childhood memories. But then we're talking about like Hurricane Dorian coming in, and I'm going, I am not okay with storms. Like hurricane warnings and blizzards and tornadoes, like the sky
We have the
attacking
best
me
parties.
is not okay.
I mean, no, those hurricane parties are wrong.
We have the best parties.
Like, and that's all about comfort there. Like, what disasters did I grow up with? I'm okay with the earth attacking me, but when the sky gets in on the game, I'm out. Like,
Do you
thanks.
think it's partly because New Zealand is perceived to be a long way away?
Yeah,
and if there's going to be
isolated.
troubles here, go as far away as you
The
can.
zombies can't get there, Richard.
The zombies cannot get to New
It's
Zealand.
the
that's
zombies
true.
can't get there, and the American political system can't get there.
It did.
The like gun violence, it's not. You don't have to have like shooter drills for your kindergartners. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why New Zealand looks really attractive. But this concept of money and buying protection is a very interesting one we're seeing more of in
Yes.
terms of things like private firefighters in Malibu, or that we're also seeing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, getting into the private army that you'll have. In the article in the New Yorker, they mentioned if you're going to be rich and you have your own private plane, you have to take the pilot's family, so that that pilot will take you to where you need to go. So you actually have to think strategically on how much of an infrastructure you need to take to be safe.
I was so excited. I went to New Zealand. Seth and Aaron and I did the Unholy Trinity down, which was a thing we did, but it doesn't matter, in Australia and New Zealand, and I loved it. It's beautiful. They have the most casual relationship with time of any people I've ever met, and I was like, as I get older, that'd be a nice place to relax, and now I'm terrified.
Don't worry, we can scare you about anywhere. Name your place.
I was really happy that Richard brought up Harold Camping, because there are few dates in history where I know exactly where I was. The day I got married was one of them. But May 21st, 2011, I know exactly where I was. I was in Oakland, California, at the Rapture RAM, the regional atheist meeting. So because he had called for this was going to be the day, we all went out there and had a big Rapture party. And, we're laughing it up and everything else. And by the way, on the religious front, I never would have been a prepper, even when I was at my most fundamentalist, because God was going to rapture me before the bad shit happened, and I wasn't going to have to worry about it.
Right.
But we were there at the Rapture meetup, and we're all sitting there, and I remember Mr. Deity was actually speaking at the time, and an earthquake happened.
No.
Now, this is the first earthquake I've ever experienced, and I'm in a room full of atheists who are mocking the prospect of a rapture and Judgment Day. And Brian's up there talking, and all of a sudden the room shakes, and everybody's looking around at each other, and like, wait, is this shit really happening? And I was and when I realized what was happening, I just yelled as loud as I could, "Is that all you got?" And it was over in no time. But it wasn't anything that anybody would have prepped for. The prep for Harold Camping's thing was a bunch of people who got convinced to sell their houses and all of their belongings and live out of a motorhome for a few years while all that money went to put billboards up around the world. And then when it doesn't happen, you're right. Many of them will double down, and it was our good work. We prayed, and God convinced God to change His mind.
Yeah.
And now they're all screwed because they've given up everything that they had. So it would have been better if they'd prepped a little bit.
So just on the how often do earthquakes happen part, there's roughly speaking about 50 earthquakes a day that are big enough to be measured, and more like 20,000 a day that are too small to even notice. So that you had a little minor earthquake in California along a tectonic boundary, an active tectonic boundary. It's like, yeah, totally gonna happen. Just gonna happen. You can always spot the Californians because when a big truck goes past, we dive under the table, drop cover, hold on. I've definitely done that during a panel before.
So if you were going to be a cult leader of some sort, you would pick like the St. Lawrence Fault, really, and build your doomsday upon that? Because wouldn't that be the most devastating if it occurred?
Oh, I mean, the most devastating earthquakes you can get are in places that aren't prepared for earthquakes.
And
Right.
that is not.
I mean, anywhere that is like has a lot of brick is just a bad place to be during an earthquake because the buildings aren't set up for it, right? But it doesn't take much to be in a bad place for some sort of disaster. I mean, if I were to set up a doomsday cult,
Why is it we feel this isn't the first time you've said those words?
In New Zealand, right?
So I would probably pick something that either I could directly influence and thus trigger the disaster to make sure I was right.
No, Mr. Bond.
Which is when I do, I've done the Evil Geniuses panel a few times where I'm like, okay, so coming up with ways of triggering this stuff. Which, I mean, triggering things that look like natural disasters but aren't is actually kind of tricky. But not that tricky. You can say, for instance, generate a volcanic eruption by dropping garbage into a volcano. Small eruptions, mind you, but you can trigger them. And there's YouTube videos about chucking garbage into into lava craters to get those little lava fountains going on. Just throw some water in there for really exciting times.
Can you fly DC-9s in there? And oh, sorry, I went Scientology.
No. You should definitely not fly anything into volcanic ash, because volcanic ash is not soot, it's tiny shards of glass, which is also why you should never breathe volcanic ash. The whole tiny shards of glass into the lungs.
That's bad.
Yeah. That's a very bad day, plus the toxic gases and all of that. You could trigger some landslides fairly easily. You just need to blow things up. A lot of unstable slopes. There's a lot of places like the Sea to Sky Highway or any road through the Rockies is a really good one for things that are not actually stable. They just haven't fallen down yet. And they're too big to keep them from falling down. Like, you can't mitigate it. You just kind of hope you're not there when it happens. So those would be good ones to do. Here's my disaster that I'm predicting. We're getting way, way better at accidentally triggering earthquakes. Does not take much again, and you can make some money off of it at the same time through fracking. Wouldn't really pick an asteroid impact or a comet impact because we don't yet have the technology to successfully guide an asteroid into the planet, or we're trying to develop the technology to guide it away from the planet. Either way, we're not so hot at it yet. And the asteroids are still really confusing us when we show up and look at them in person, and we're like, oh, well, in robot, looking at them going, hey, that's way, way different than I expected. But we are currently doing things like bombing and shooting asteroids to sample them. So maybe if we piss them off enough, they'll come for us.
Well, that's what the dinosaurs did, you see.
Yeah, exactly. Hurricanes I wouldn't really do as my doomsday item either because, again, we are currently actively creating more of them through warming our entire planet. So we have a warmer ocean, more warm ocean, higher energy, more energy in the system, bigger storms, faster storms, more frequent storms.
Go ahead.
I'll argue that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I wouldn't pick it as my doomsday item because I can't control a storm path.
True.
Like, I can't send it somewhere. So that would not be my doomsday item.
You're not praying hard enough.
Yeah.
So
Or
because
apparently not nuking it hard enough.
that was actually one of the things that was brought up on an episode of Nonprofits that we did after Katrina. I remember Pat Robertson and others were suggesting that Katrina was God's punishment for the U.S.'s policies, or the fact that we didn't hate all the gays.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's the French Quarter, which had the magical gay shield that was protected from Katrina and moved it around. So, and now we know how to counter religious prayers for destruction. I think if we maybe positioned pockets of homosexuals around the world, we could control weather patterns on the planet,
Just
end
add more
poverty and
rainbows.
hunger, and maybe avoid the apocalypse.
Add more rainbows. I mean, when looking through my list of like disaster mythology, we've got a lot of things about like 7 seals, 7 trumpets, lambs with 7 eyes. Apparently 7 is really big on killing everybody. Giant roosters, wolves breaking free of chains, 8 suns, 7 suns, comet strikes, but none of it is about rainbows. Rainbows are not a herald of the apocalypse.
There you go.
So if we just have enough rainbows everywhere, this is our new disaster prep plan.
Wolves
Buy more
breaking free
rainbows.
of chains?
Yeah, that's Ragnarok.
Oh, okay.
Ragnarok. It's a giant wolf breaking free of a chain, big snake getting free, 3 roosters crowing.
So, good bar trivia hint for you guys if you need to know it. The Georgia and the Carolinas, the one natural disaster you guys can't get is a volcano.
There you go.
You can get hit with everything else, but you can't have a volcano. So you're safe on that one. But
We have sand, I think. We don't have it.
You got like limestone.
Yeah.
You can have sinkholes.
you have sinkholes, earthquakes, hurricanes, everything else, but no
Comet impact.
Yeah, no volcanic activity.
Like big geomagnetic pulses. That's another really fun one in that we have all of this mythology about it again. Of what happens if we have a cosmic ray or coronal mass ejection. Every time you see northern lights, it's like a sign that maybe we should harden our electrical grid and spend that like $30 million to harden it. But
So I would bet on that one. Mine would be the CME. That's what's
Yeah.
going to hit. Statistically, that's probably the most likely natural disaster to happen. We're pretty much due, for a Carrington level CME event. Just to, that's like one where like in 100 years probably going to happen.
So, do you want to explain what the Carrington event was?
Yeah, so CME is a coronal mass ejection, so it's essentially a solar magnetic storm And if it happens to be aimed at the Earth, that's sort of the critical one. There are bigger ones that we've seen that just weren't aimed at us. But if it's aimed at the Earth and it's pretty big, essentially you get hit with a storm of ionized particles from the sun. Then those ionized particles come down, the magnetic lines of the Earth's magnetic field, and they can induce a current in anything that's conducting, right? The magnetic fields of this storm will induce a current, because that's how electromagnetism works. That could basically short out, electronic devices. To what size depends on how big a storm it is. So a CME of average size could wipe out a lot of our satellites. They could induce currents and basically blow up transformers. That's probably the biggest risk, is that the power grid is not currently hardened against a CME. And if that happened, there are these giant transformers that are necessary for the grid, and it could take us years to replace them, like 2 or 3 years. So imagine power outages lasting years, like 3 years before we really restore power. That could realistically happen. Right now, our power grid is not hardened against a CME that can cause that. Now, the last giant CME that hit the Earth was the Carrington event in the 1880s. What was the 60s, 70s, something like that.
Just at the start.
It was right after we installed the telegraph lines. Yeah, so and it was strong enough to induce these telegraph lines in some locations to basically short out and catch fire. That's like just one little wire running under the ground. Now imagine our existing power grid, which is, I don't know, millions of times more wire than what we had 100 years ago. And again, these things happen every 100 years or so, and we're already 100 and whatever years after the Carrington event. It's statistically likely that something like this is going to happen within the next 40, 50, 60 years, almost certainly by 100. I mean, it's like a random event, so you never know, but that's the kind of thing that happens on a century kind of level. It's not like an asteroid where it's like, the next one could be 1 million years from now or 10 million years from now. This is probably going to be decades. And the question is, are we going to harden our satellites? The military satellites are hardened against it, but are we going to harden our satellite infrastructure? Are we going to harden our electrical grid before it hits? I'm betting no, because if we haven't done it by now, what are we waiting for? It's going to cost, it'll cost a couple $100 billion to do it, but it'll save trillions of dollars. And we're just not good at doing that. We're not good at spending billions to save trillions, as multiple lines of evidence to support that. So that's what I think is that's the most likely serious disaster to actually happen. And that happens on the scale of over a course of a lifetime. It's reasonably likely to happen, as opposed to everything else, which is very unlikely to happen. And we can prevent it, but we're not. And if it happens, do the thought experiment. Okay, what would happen if I lost power to my house, and it wasn't coming on anytime soon? Like
for years.
Yeah, at least months are going to go by. Before, but it could be like if you're in the worst part of the country that got hit, it could be literally 2 or 3 years before you get power back. And it's not just you, it's like this, like the country's out, just imagine what that's going to do. This is something that could actually realistically happen. If I had to place a bet, that's what I would bet as a realistic disaster scenario.
So
you mean no Netflix?
No Netflix
no
at all.
Netflix.
Except for, I do have one exception to this, which is in 1989, Quebec Power got hit by coronal mass ejection.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And afterwards they rebuilt with a hardened electrical system.
So move to Quebec.
So not only just move to Quebec, but if this does actually happen, we're all going to be having to beg Quebec for help.
Right.
So practice your s'il vous plaît. And keep in mind, so I'm Western Canadian, and I am fully aware that Francophone Canadian is got this over us, and they are seriously set up to be able to sell off power to other regions if they go down. So yeah.
Wouldn't they just apologize and do it for us anyway?
So you're mistaking Francophone Quebec and Anglophone Quebec. So we have some cultural differences there. And unless you ask in French, you're not getting help.
How would that affect the Waffle House Index? because that's what FEMA is using in the southeast to verify the severity of disaster. So I'll let y'all think on that. But in the meantime, we've got a microphone up here if you have questions for our panelists. We've got about 20 minutes left before we have to stop and do a shameless plug. So I see a person there. Come right on.
So I've always wondered how these guys pick the number of years out they predict the end of the world. Because if it's so far out, no one's giving you all their stuff. If it's too close, you've got to come up with the excuses. Yeah. So for your theoretical
for my cult,
how many years would you predict?
I was going to say, I think everybody should have to come up with their own doomsday cult up here as part of your challenge. What would yours look like, and what would the timeline and the mechanism of it be? So if it was a disaster I could harness, then I can do it anytime I need to and just like trigger one along the way. But let's say I'm picking a disaster that I can't control, big earthquake, asteroid impact, something like that. I mean, you want it a couple of years out so you can get everybody scared enough to give you all their money and to collect it all and then run away and disappear, right? Like there's zero accountability is kind of the way these things work. I mean, if you're truly Machiavellian about it, you get them to kill themselves first, and then they really can't come after you. But if you've got enough money, you can run and hide, possibly in New Zealand. I would actually pick Tasmania. Having been there before, it is a very good place to disappear. Plus, they have the most adorable wildlife. You can go find some quolls, and then you'll feel better about your moral failings. So that would be, if I was the one in charge of a doomsday cult, I'd put it a couple of years out in advance, get all the money, get all the resources, and then spend that to disappear. I guess not Tasmania, now that I've acknowledged that's my bug-out location. How about you guys? Where would you take your doomsday cult, and what would it be?
Hang on, I'm looking to see how long it takes to make a really good rum, because that's how long it's going to take me to get my cult to a...
Well, all right, so I've already chosen CME. I agree, like 5 to 7 years is probably a good time frame, but here's the thing. You tell them that time frame that's enough, that it's soon enough, like, yeah, give me your money, and we will make a local hardened grid just for our neighborhood or whatever the area is, and our own generators and everything, and that's going to cost, a couple $1 million. And then you're predicting the CME based on the sunspots or whatever, pick something. And then, of course, when you get close enough, and it's not going to happen, you go, you know what, we recalculated, it's going to be another 5 years. And you could probably string them along that way, so you keep that carrot in front of them, but you just keep stringing them out longer till the end, until you're done.
This is what the Jehovah's Witnesses have been doing for a century or more. One of my very early skeptical events I went to, there was a speaker about cults, and I think she said that her family was caught up in the 1975 end of the world prediction by the Jehovah's Witnesses. And when it doesn't happen, they'll just... That's right. She said when it didn't happen, the leaders said they calculated the wrong date because they were basing it off when Adam was created, not Eve. So they got that a bit wrong. But the point is, it's okay. We've got it slightly wrong, or we didn't believe hard enough, but the next one is the real one. The next one is the real one. Meanwhile, their followers grow old and die, and new followers come along. So it just goes on and on and on. And I think if I was to do one, picking a handy date like the year 2000. There was things about the year 2000.
Not just Y2K.
Not just Y2K.
Two cults around Y2K,
yeah. And then it was 2012, of course, and Nostradamus said 1996 or 7 or something like that. If you can find a reference or an ancient reference, yeah, you can string that one along quite a bit, I think.
The way I don't actually have a doomsday scenario, but the way that we manipulate numbers and manipulate people, and you can, we can stretch this out like we did the math wrong and all those other things. I think the thing that, to me, that's most distressing is the number of people who are convinced that there's going to be some sort of doomsday apocalypse scenario, and it's based on, I don't know, Trump or whatever you want to pick.
Yeah.
And now they're buying Jim Baker's buckets of food and storing them and all this other stuff, when not only the CMEs you were talking about, but climate change, and we have other real issues. If we could take all the money that was being directed to buckets of food that are not going to go anywhere and start using it to, I don't know, rebuild infrastructure and start making whatever changes we could. Well, I wonder, and as somebody who spends a lot of time talking about ethics and morality, and I don't accept that the ends justify the means. But I almost think in the case of convincing people who are prone to accepting disasters of a real potential disaster, even if you scare the crap out of them and are not necessarily honest, I'm almost close to saying the ends would justify the means on that.
So you scam them out of the money and then use it for something good.
Well, mine will be financial because the stock market goes up and down all the time, so it wouldn't take much to just say, oh, you know, and you can reset it every single time. So it's like, well, it reset. There you go. And then you'd hide your religion under another, a shadow company that has another shadow company that has another one. So it's like, how do you find, the actual owner and stuff? So and financial fear is like one of the leading things. Again, I knew several people that bought into gold when it's just like, why? And then they took a bath on it, and it's just so easy to prey upon that type of faculty. It's just, so mine will be financial.
I had a thought along the way here of this idea of the things that reoccur often enough that you can just be like, no, it's about to happen again, for real this time. Yellowstone. So the big Yellowstone eruption, big super volcano. Oh! You can ask the question anyway.
Ask the question.
You can give me a prompt on it. But so some of the things that happen on like an annual basis are some of the size, like the myths that I get directed at me being like, is it going to erupt for real this time? Are the roads are melting, which is like an annual event. It just happens. You're going to have bubbly little roads. You've got a lot of geothermal activity there. It's fine. We're used to this. It's part of the maintenance budget. That there's little earthquakes being picked up by the seismometers, which, constantly. There's like 20,000 earthquakes a day around the world. Yes, there's going to be some there. Just like anything moving. I mean, seismometers are ridiculously sensitive. We're going to notice the cars going past. We're going to notice like the herds of bison wandering past. I mean, I have seismic signals of spiders doing mating dances. Like, we can pick it all up. You cannot hide your secrets from seismometers. We've also got them of teenagers who decided our seismometers were a lover's lane.
The love wave earthquake.
Yes, the love waves of the Cascadia subduction zone.
I love that. I love that story.
Or the seismometer's going offline, and you're like, yes, this is high-precision, delicate equipment left out in the rain for years. They break. Ta-da! So that's a constant one that we are like, I swear it's every 3 months. Yellowstone is erupting! The volcanologists are hiding it in a conspiracy theory, and you're like, why? What money do we make off of this? Yeah. Who is paying me to hide this data? I would really like to know, because I have a lot of checks that I need to invoice for.
That's
just
actually
direct
brilliant.
deposit that right in. I want my cash for hiding.
That's actually brilliant. As soon as you mentioned turning the detection equipment, or the detection equipment goes down, you could intentionally turn it off and spin that. And at dinner, coincidentally enough, we were talking about that episode of The Twilight Zone, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, or The Monsters Landed on Maple Street, where the aliens basically turn the lights off and let chaos ensue and say, see, they're not ready. That is the apocalypse scenario, and it's all about preying on our fears. Yeah. And getting back to what I was saying a minute ago, what frustrates me is that the things people seem to be most afraid of and willing to invest in for their protection don't necessarily map to what's most likely or most dangerous, and things that we really should be afraid of. Screw it,
Absolutely.
Be fine.
It's like that so gets me is humans are incredibly bad at high intensity, low frequency events. Everyone's going to win the lottery. Nobody's going to be around for the next big earthquake. Like, your odds of death by landslide are 1 in a million per year. Jazz hands again on that one. That's what they are. We design it. We engineer those odds. And yet we're somehow shocked when on a planet of a few billion people every year, people die in landslides.
Landslide insurance, that's where the business I'm going in next.
1 in a million per year, death by landslide. Pretty much death by any, geohazard is going to be odds of death are 1 in a million, because that's what we design the odds to be. We mitigate until we reach those odds. That's how much money we're willing to spend.
All right, sir.
So, to what degree, if any, do you think that this mindset that the end is near and soon and inevitable, to what degree do you think that influences certain groups' pushback against doing anything about climate change, investing in renewable energy, managing pollution?
This is like the most frustrating thing in the world that I've now run into is the people who used to do climate change denial at me are now doing like climate change catastrophism. I don't even know what to call it. Where they're just like, too late. You're like, you can't do that. No, you changed the rules.
I think it's because they find it easier. Like, oh well, we don't have to do anything because we can't, and because well, that's hard, so I don't want to. It's an old joke at like the start of every disaster movie. There's a scientist being ignored.
Yes.
Yeah. And we're all sitting there going, listen to us. Yeah.
But there seems to be a mentality there that they like almost want the end of the world to happen, right? It's like, so I don't think there's this rational like, oh, we don't have to prep for tomorrow because the world's going to end. I think they're just living their life and they're preppers. You know, I think it's like their DragonCon. Like they do this to break the monotony of their lives and they fantasize about being a hero of the apocalypse. And I think it's their fantasy life, really, seriously. They, on some level, I think they know it's never going to happen. On another level, they really want it to happen. But either way, they're entertaining themselves, you know, with the fantasy of the apocalypse.
You're right The on that. I've seen that on
the hero
several
fantasy.
shows where, you know, the patriarch is like, I'm here to save all of you.
Well, there's a psychological aspect of it where, you know, most people are probably quite frustrated frequently that they don't seem to be a significant part of society. And so if I prep and it turns out I'm right and my neighbors didn't prep, not only was I right, but now I have that kind of lauded position of being the savior of my little community, and then I get to sit around and tell, I fucking told you so for 20 years, so, you know, thanks,
10 Cloverfield Lane, you know, it's the guy who prepped and then it turns out to be right. But, yeah, I agree.
Or Noah's Ark.
It's an illusion of control, too. I think it gives people this, I'm doing something, I'm prepping for something, it gives them an illusion of control. They don't have to worry about all the complexities of, like, actually keeping the civilization running. I'll just stack up food to prepare for when it goes under. You know, it sort of simplifies your goals a little bit.
When you get into that mindset too, there's a whole community of people out there on the internet ready to help you in that community and to continue that.
It's like misdirected preparing. It's the most powerful thing about science and the practice of science is that we can look around at the world as it currently is and create the world that we want. Like we can control the future and pick that one and work towards it and get it. And that is such an incredibly powerful, amazing, astonishing tool. And we're not doing it.
Well, I think we've got time for one more long question or two more short questions.
You almost segued into my question, which is basically instead of sort of the passive aspect of the world's going to end, I think that there are people who have more of an active, we want to bring on the apocalypse. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? They're like religious people who think, you know, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, things like that will create or trigger the apocalypse. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
It's more like it's going to happen anyway, and here are the signs.
But
you're right. They're trying to precipitate it.
They want to. We know what the signs are. Yeah. So we're in power. Let's make some of these happen.
In one specific instance, so there's no such thing. If I teach you nothing else about religion this weekend, there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian. There are Jews and there are Christians. Judeo-Christian is a label that Christians came up with in order to prepare for the end. And so this is why we need to be friends of Israel. We need to support this because we need to set up, as you were pointing out, you know, with regard to embassies and stuff, this is where God is coming back according to a particular religion. And these things need to take place before we can usher in the end times, which, if for a variety of Christian denominations, is the goal. And they know it's going to happen, and they don't know when, but boy, they seem to keep trying to predict exactly when, which is like the first response to Harold Camping is, you know, if the Bible literally says no man knows the day or the hour, And Harold's just like, well, I didn't say a day or an hour. I said May 21st, 2011. Sometime today, let's all sit around and wait. It's going to happen.
It's not on
because
Thursday.
they are looking for the thing that comes after. And it's one of the things that I find personally most repugnant about religion and religions like this, even if they were true, is that the entirety of everything we know about life, everything we've ever experienced, everybody we've ever loved, everything we've ever cared about is nothing. Because the real life starts after you die. Mm-hmm. And as long as you have that kind of mentality, how can you get people to focus on the one and only life we know we're going to have so that we stop screwing it up?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. It's that getting caught up in the future. Mm-hmm. It's stop and enjoy today.
She touched it.
Okay. On a scale of 1 to 5, I'm just curious, what would each of you, how would you each rate the issue of the importance of addressing climate change, 1 being the lowest rating and 5 being the highest, and how urgent that is as far as our own survival as a species?
110.
I'm going to be right up there with this.
Yeah.
So, once upon a time and long, long ago, there was a blue-green algae called a stromatolite. And it grew in the oceans as mats, and it got like sedimented and all that. And it breathed in the Earth's atmosphere and breathed out oxygen. And it breathed out so much oxygen, it oxygenated the entire oceans, the iron precipitated out, made banded iron formations. That's where we get our iron from now. And it kept breathing it out. And it kept breathing out so much it oxygenated the atmosphere. We call this the Great Oxygenation Event. From the stromatolite perspective, it's the Great Oxygenation Catastrophe. These algae fundamentally changed the atmospheric composition of the Earth into something they could no longer survive. And most of them died off. There's like a little pocket in Shark Bay, Australia. There's even more inaccessible pockets in South America. And that was the most rapid and extreme climate change that has happened in the history of the Earth. Fundamentally changed it all. Great for us. We got to live. There was the Cambrian explosion of life in response to an oxygenated atmosphere. My ambition is I would like humans to be more strategic than algae. I would like us to be smarter than stromatolites. And that is it. Like, I don't need things to be good. I need them to be less bad. And on a scale of 1 to 5, I am right up there in the hundreds in terms of the importance of being smarter than algae.
I'm smarter than algae. That's a T-shirt. I like that.
Actively working to survive.
Yeah, I agree. It's clearly a high priority. I don't think that we're going to go extinct. I think that we're just going to make it suck a lot, and it's going to be really expensive. Yeah, it's
stromatolites in Shark Bay, Australia.
Yeah, it's right. We're going to lose a lot of coastal territory. There's going to be lots of climate refugees. There's going to be places that are going to be too hot to be inhabitable. Our agriculture is going to be shifting north, so we're not going to be able to feed as many people. There's going to be a lot of downsides to it. It's going to cost trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to mitigate it, and they'll be looking back and say, well, we could have fixed it for like 1/100th of the cost, a few decades ago, but we didn't. Why exactly? Because we just have our head up our ass, politically speaking. There's really no reason. There's things that we could do that are win-wins. That like this is a smart thing to do. Everybody wins. It'll start moving us in the right direction, and we're not even doing that. We're not even doing the obvious things we should be doing. Our only hope is that technology will advance despite our political failure, and and things will improve to avoid the worst of it. We're not going to avoid it completely. It's already too late. We're already
just
past,
make it less bad.
It's already past
less
the point of badness. It's inevitable because basically the CO2 we've already put into the air is going to continue warming the planet for decades, and we're putting in more CO2 every year. So we're still putting in more every year. We haven't even started decreasing the amount. We need to reduce it to zero, and let the effects, start to re-equilibrate. So even if we extrapolate, if we went to zero carbon release today, which is not going to happen, there's going to be bad, global warming, and then probably it looks like this is really the big question. The question is, are we going to mitigate global warming quickly enough to avoid irreversible change tipping points that once we're past those tipping points, there's no way to fix them on a human civilization timescale. Like if the ice melts off of Greenland and Antarctica, that takes millions of years to put back. It's not coming back in human civilization timeline. We've permanently altered the Earth, and we'll have to adapt to it, and that's going to suck. So can we prevent that? Currently, we're not on a track to prevent that. It's an unknown. I think it's probably unlikely. But if we do massive, effort to start to turn the ship around, maybe we can avoid that worst. We don't really know. That's a question mark, even among the scientists. But that's really the question at this point: is how bad is it going to get? Not is it going to get bad?
Yeah.
Okay, so last 5 seconds per person. Let's get a shameless plug.
Hi. That was my score. Hi, by the way.
Hi.
Hi. Shameless plug.
I don't need a shameless plug. I'm doing like 5 panels.
Magic
I'll
Act
fit in
tomorrow night?
Another one.
Magic Act tomorrow night?
Yeah, Magic Act tomorrow night, along with Kurt Anderson and Jamie Ian Swiss. And then there's it's listed as live atheist experience, but if you thought we were taking calls, I'm just going to sit up here and answer questions.
Shameless plug, I'm doing the Skeptics Zone live here tomorrow afternoon at 5:30, I think it is. I hope to see you.
Critical Thinking panel tomorrow at 7, SGU private show tomorrow at 8, SGU live show Sunday at 7.
I'm doing all the science of sci-fi stuff, so science of Star Trek, Star Wars, and Stargate, any of them on the different tracks. But the most and also Avengers. Doom of Avengers, could we survive? But most relevant to you guys is pre-apocalyptic party planning, an all-ages event over on the Apocalypse Rising track about how you can do party planning to increase your disaster preparedness.
Go out with a bang.
It's actually a legitimate thing to do, right up there with have some water.
So at 7 o'clock tonight, I'm going to be doing the Brains on Brains, starting the zombie apocalypse. And if I don't get activated for dealing with an honest-to-God hurricane, I'll be running around the rest of the weekend. And if not, I hope to see you guys next year.
First off, rate this panel on the app. You can find me in Xtrack for Warehouse 13. Bingo tomorrow night for Doctor Who. Creativity and Skepticism is on Sunday with me. And find me on the app.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Please thank our panel. I see Margaret is in the back, and she is still looking for costumed people in the parade, and she will supply the costumes. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We'll see you soon.